Hi everyone, I'm Russell, I'm from the MCG committee, and in this session we've got three interesting talks on the theme of impacts and engagement, looking at how we can convincingly use data and some of the ethical and scale impacts of doing it. So each speaker is going to talk in turn, and then at the end we'll have a Q&A session. So we'll try and cover, and I'll do my best to cover all the questions that you ask. So if you can pop them in the chat, and I'll try and pick them out as we go along. So to start with, we have Julian Hartley, who is co-founder of DimSumDigital, presenting museums, the challenge and opportunity of data-driven public engagement. So over to you, Julian.
So hi everyone. I'll just get my slides up and running. Hold on a sec. So hopefully you can all see the slides now. So I'm Julian from DimSumDigital, a company that offers consultancy and data understanding for organizations in the media and cultural sector. So for this short presentation, the idea is to chart some of the ways museums can use transactional or consumer data from, for example, supermarket loyalty card schemes as a source of insight to drive public engagement. And I think it's a truism to say that the trail or transactional data we leave when we're out and about reveals a lot about who we are and who we are not. And that awareness of people's lives is crucial to engaging the public. It informs and structures the museum's communication, their language, approach, and channel. Loyalty card schemes often include big data items such as adult names, postcodes. And you'll see on the slide, I've used an image of an artwork by Rachel Whiteread showing a cluster of model houses. For me, it's a useful reminder that if museums are going to be engaging, they have to be places where people live. They have to be relevant, to the places where people live and how they live. When talking about data-driven public engagement, it's perhaps useful first to clarify what is being meant by engagement and the role data has within that. So perhaps a simple and broad way of thinking about engagement is as a live space of interaction between museums and society, a space where museums adapt what they do because of new knowledge about a particular community or public. And data-driven engagement happens when knowledge of the public or community is revealed in data situated outside the museum, possibly, as in my case, generated as a byproduct of some automated transaction. And one area, I think, where the potential for data-driven public engagement is clear is in the difference it can make to the work museums already do to support mental health. I've identified here just a few examples of how museums are supporting wellness in the community, partnering with mental health organizations to learn from them about how best to support people. In many ways, museums have become an integral part of plans to reduce the incidence of mental health problems at a population level. And the need for museums to support mental health in London communities is clear to see in this heat map. The map identifies priority areas at risk of poor mental health and was produced for Thrive London, a citywide movement to improve the well-being of all Londoners, and is supported by the Mayor of London and led by the London Health Board partners. It's interesting that the high risk of poor mental health in East London is bang on the doorstep of a soon-to-arrive V&A East. It's also interesting to look at the data used to make the map. 28 indicators of mental health inequalities, including rates of domestic violence, homelessness, unemployment, crime, ethnicity, and learning disability prevalence, as well as the prevalence of long-term conditions disproportionately linked with mental health problems, such as diabetes and heart disease. These variables are routinely recorded by UK organisations, ranging from the Office of National Statistics to the Ministry of Justice and the Metropolitan Police. However, the problem with this data is that on its own, its usefulness is rather limited to informing policy. The knowledge it reveals is not actionable in terms of making decisions about how to engage this or that community. It simply does not reveal enough detail about people's lives in those locations. In particular, the relation between ethnicity, lifestyle, and residential location. The next two slides identify additional sources of data, including the use of algorithms which infer ethnic heritage from people's names and explore the potential uses of the knowledge revealed in the data to drive decision making. So this map is taken from Richard Webber, and it shows postcode data for Brent for March 2020. Individual postcodes being coloured according to their most numerous minority. The green postcodes in the north are mostly Hindu or Sikh. The pink dots in the east are Muslim, and the purple dots in the south are Black Caribbean communities. Algorithms which infer ethnic heritage from people's names make it possible to map ethnicity using a finer level of categorization compared to, for example, the census. And knowing the detailed spatial distribution of minorities has real utility for informing targeted communication, particularly when linked to consumer data. For example, data from supermarket loyalty card program is able to distinguish between transactions which take place in-store and those which take place online. Overlaying this data with knowledge of ethnicity and social geography reveals many aspects of lifestyle, attitudes, and behaviors that can inform varied acts by museums to support mental health. Should another lockdown happen, and hopefully not, using an ethnic cluster propensity to shop online is indicative of digital skills, suggesting a museum's digital outreach and online programs might work. And knowing both the ethnicity and the language can also help shape the nature of that digital offer and how to communicate it, i.e. identify the billboard in Brent which will have the greatest impact. The data tells us that different streets of low socioeconomic status attract very different ethnic groups with particular behaviors, and understanding how ethnicity and everyday life interconnect is important for the design of communication strategies for reaching high-risk minority groups. And in public engagement, you need to map your communities, who they are, where they are, what are their needs and priorities, and what they have to offer. A data-driven approach is an opportunity, I think, to do public engagement differently. Engage with a greater diversity of people at a larger scale than is possible with non-data methods, but also work in tandem with those established ways of working. That said, using data in the way I've been talking about is challenging to museums for varied and understandable reasons. Some of those challenges are listed in this slide and came to the surface during a research fellowship at the V&A that was looking at the potential of big data to support engagement with the museum store collections. And one phrase there that stuck with me was, "It just doesn't feel right." And when I would say why, what was it that didn't feel right? The answer was often ethics, Julian. I want to finish up here with a focus on ethics. In my conversations, reassurances that data is anonymized, that general data protection regulation rules have been applied, or that stringent effort has been made to reduce risk of data bias, there's little to overcome what I think is fair to describe as an anxiety about using big data to drive decision-making in public engagement, particularly at a neighborhood level. Nor does the counter-argument that leaving people excluded from museum programs is unethical. I now wonder if a time to shift the argument on ethics has come about, to argue for an ethics more suited to a digital society. So that's me done, and thank you for listening. I'm around for questions, but please do get in touch if you want to discuss anything to do with data-driven public engagement. Thanks very much.
That's fantastic. Thanks very much, Julian. Next up, we have Shalen Fu, PhD researcher from King's College London, who is demonstrating the impact of digital museum resources. So Shalen, over to you.
Hello. Okay, let me put up my slides up. So hello, everyone. I'm Shalen Fu, a PhD researcher from King's College London. Today, I would like to share with you some of my research findings about measuring the impact of digital museum resources, and hopefully to give you some insights on collecting the right type of data for your organization. So let's get started by looking at what you can get out of this presentation. Firstly, a conceptual model to guide your impact assessment process, in particular, writing up your data collection plan. And then 4 sets of impact indicators to help you categorize your data into different categories to tell a compelling impact story. And some insights about different types of impact in order of importance, different forms of evidence to support impact claims, and finally, about impact beneficiaries. So the remaining of the presentation is structured into 4 sections. I will briefly introduce the BVI model, the impact indicators, some lessons learned from this research project, and some evidence of impact to be considered. So my research project is based on the balanced value impact model developed by Professor Simon Tanner at King's, which is also the foundation of Europeana Impact Playbook. Due to the time constraint, I won't be able to go into details, but I will put links at the end of the slides so you can have a read afterwards. So the BVI model is a conceptual tool that breaks down the impact assessment process into 5 stages. The first 2 stages are particularly relevant to writing up a successful data collection plan and to ensure you collect the right type of data before narrating your impact stories. And based on this model, I developed 4 sets of impact indicators for museums in China. Although my research has a strong China focus, I believe that some of the research findings are applicable in different cultural contexts. So to ensure that the indicators I develop are valid and considered useful, I conducted survey research with both museum professionals and public audiences in China. They were asked to rate each indicator from 1, strongly disagree that digital museum resources cannot have such impact, to 5, strongly agree that these resources actually can demonstrate such impact. They were also asked to rank the importance level of different types of impact. So the survey collected 494 valid responses from public individuals covering a wide range of demographics, and also 43 valid responses from professionals working for 39 museums across China. And these museums vary in type, level, grade, and governance. To expand the survey result, I also conducted 30 in-depth interviews with 20 public participants and 10 professionals in museum senior management. So here are a list of the finalized indicators in the economic impact category. We have income, employment, tourism, leisure activity, and local economy. I want to take employment as an example. It requires museum to demonstrate an associated growth in employment, wages, and salary payments. So it's what you can use is, for instance, how many job opportunities have been created during the development of your digital resources. If you chose to outsourcing or collaborating with third parties, then how many personnel were involved and what their income level like. And then in the social impact category, we have indicators like accessibility, that's more to do with quantitative data to showcase that your resources have increased public accessibility to cultural heritage. We also have indicators like social inclusion, that's more to do with qualitative data to demonstrate that your resources have improved people's understanding of different cultures. There are also indicators like social ties. The assessment team can use, for instance, social network analysis to trace the relationship and flows between people, organizations, and groups online to see whether these digital resources help to forge new community networks. And then moving on to the innovation impact category. I will take partnership, for example. It's useful to demonstrate that through developing new digital resources, your organization has forged new types of partnerships, for instance, with tech companies, startups, or other community groups. And then finally, in operational impact category, I'll take skills as an example. It'll be useful to demonstrate that due to the development of your digital resources and within this process, your organization has helped improve staff capability, especially their digital skills. So when we talk about impact, we are not only talking about those external ones, but also the internal impacts. On this slide, it showcases the order of importance of different types of impact. So for museum professionals, they think that operational impact is the most important factor, and then comes innovation, social, and economic. However, public participants have a different view. They believe that museums should focus on demonstrating their social impact, and then comes innovation, operational, and economic. So here's the first lesson learned. We need to ask that who is the impact report for, and what data takes priority during collection if different stakeholders have differing views on the significance ordering of impact. So it will be helpful to host a workshop with different stakeholders and try to create a common ground about what aspects of impact your organization want to focus on. But I want to highlight the fact that although operational impact comes to the third place in public responses, when I delved deeper into the data, I realized that there is a good number of people actually chose operational impact as the most important factor. And during the interview process, several participants mentioned that due to COVID-19, it's important for museum to first operate well and survive before thinking about other types of impact. So the second lesson learned here is that the significance ordering of impact is not fixed. So we should always link our data collection plan or the way we use data to wider social economic factors, just so we are presenting what is considered important to people at present. And then I want to draw your attention to the lowest rated indicator in the social impact category, which is social ties. Many participants think that using digital museum resources doesn't really help them to develop new social relationships. So they considered this indicator less useful than other indicators in this category. However, when I look at the rating of this indicator and audience demographic data, I realized that for people who live closer to rural areas, they actually benefit hugely from using museum digital resources as a way to expand their social network. And this phenomenon exists in all the cases of lowest rated indicators, and it echoes their museum visit frequency data. For people who live in villages and rural areas in China, 80% of them have never been to physical museums. So a lesson learned here is that we should adopt a more nuanced approach to understand the beneficiaries of digital impact, rather than considering them as a homogeneous community. It will be interesting to see how audiences in different locations, age groups, or gender groups receive impact differently to tell a richer impact story. And then let's look at evidence of impact. On this slide, in the first column, these are some available data currently used by many museums in China. For instance, statistics about resource usage, online activity and events, media publicity, big data. But I really want to highlight the second column, which are some alternative forms of data suggested by public participants. For instance, nowadays, audience prefer visual information, so videos and documentaries are considered a really convincing evidence of museum impact, and given that they can reach a wide audience group via channels like YouTube. And also it's interesting that emojis and memes are considered useful data to tell audience emotions and reactions to online exhibitions, for instance. Some participants also mentioned that we should use the number of new visitors to showcase that with the digital museum resources, we really lower down the barrier for people who did not have access to heritage resources previously. And some people suggest that the number of returning visitors instead of first-time users is considered more convincing evidence to support your impact claim. And finally, one participant suggests that a museum should establish a centralized rating system like IMDb or Goodreads to allow audience to rate and leave comments about digital resources, which will provide rich data to analyze the impact of our resources. There are also issues. For instance, how can we balance the use of qualitative and quantitative data to tell compelling impact stories? And how can we improve our ability to interpret data and extract more useful information from what we have? And also some concerns around how to ensure that data is not corrupted to museums' advantage. And finally, it's the privacy issue. What might be the ethical considerations around collecting detailed demographic data about our audiences? So here on the final slide, these are the key takeaways from the presentation. I have translated the key points into questions for you to think about. And there are also links to the useful resources I mentioned earlier. So thanks for listening. I hope I have provided some useful insights and hope to answer questions at a later stage.
Thank you very much, Shalen. That's a lot of information there for everyone. So it'll be fantastic when we get to the Q&A section. And finally, we've got Jennifer Pullar. She's the Communications Manager of Digital Collections at the Natural History Museum and is going to be talking about bats about data, saving the world one byte at a time. Over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you. Hi. My name is Jen and I am the Communication Manager at the Digital Collections Programme for Natural History Museum. And I'm going to be talking about bats about data, saving the world one byte at a time. Okay, great, it works. So natural history collections offer a unique record of biodiversity going back hundreds of years and geodiversity going back millennia. This means they can be used in a wide range of research, and when research informs decision-making, these decisions are based on hundreds of years of data. At the museum, we hold 80 million specimens, and we're hoping to digitize all of them so that we can increase access and use of the collections. So going back hundreds of years gives us a really important baseline rate for biodiversity from before widespread intensive farming, industrialization, and climate change. And this is really important, and I can demonstrate that here with these graphs. So the top graph shows the distribution change of UK butterflies over the last 100 years. And in total, it's remained about the same. It's declined by around 15%. Doesn't look that much of a big deal. If we look at the graph below, we can see that this is split into generalist and specialist species. So generalist species are types of butterflies that can eat a range of plants and they might be able to travel further for their food. And specialists are the opposite. So they might only have one host plant that they feed on and they can't travel far. So if you imagine if their area has been changed into farmland, these are the species that are going to be most affected by that change. If we take the bottom graph, we can see there's a dotted line there around 1970s. And this is when most observational records start. So when people observe insects and other animals in the field year on year and record data around this. If you only look back to 1970s, you would think that the generalists and specialists always had this difference in how well they were doing. But by using museum data and tracking back 100 years, we can see that that's not the case. They started off both the same, both doing well, and actually it's the generalists that have increased and the specialists that have declined. So let's backtrack and just talk briefly about what do we mean by digitization. So in its most basic form, digitization is just transforming analog information into digitally discoverable data. For us, when we have specimens, we have label data, and this might contain information like who collected it, when they collected it and where, and what the specimen is. And what we want to do is release this information online so that people know what we've got. We might also take images of our specimens. We might do 3D models of our specimens. We might take genomic or molecular data, and we might also put this information online, and we would refer to this as an extended specimen. But what we're really looking to do is digitize everything at the most basic level first. Now, when we say digitize, we don't mean that anything is digitized until we've released it online. We have a museum data portal, and we've got 4.9 million specimens on there, so around 6% of the collection. And this is 5-star open link data, so people can use this data in relation to other data sources, and it's machine readable. So through our data portal and through data aggregator Global Biodiversity Information Facility, we know that we've had 29 billion downloads, over 438 download events since 2015, and 1,441 scientific papers cite our research over areas like climate change, conservation, intensive species, lots of different areas that are really important and answering the big questions for scientists today. What we can do is we can then investigate the studies that are using our data and find out what they're using, how it's integrating with other data sources. We can write up these case studies to share with others and talk about the importance of sharing our data. This is a study that used our records of the woolly monkey combined with records around the world of the same species to understand what areas of conservation would benefit the species and rainforest most. We share our stories, case studies, and digitization work with our audiences. Like this is a creative image that we have created using an algorithm to replace the pixels of a photograph with images of our digital collection. If you look right at the back, there's some kind of bluey purple colors that are kind of representing our stained glass windows. These are made up from the blue chalk-hill butterfly. We have 24,000 blue chalk-hill butterflies in the collection, and it took 2 digitizers 3 months to digitize them and release their information online. By sharing images like this, we can talk about the massive challenge of releasing that data online. When we're talking about sharing with audiences, we're talking to people on Twitter, on Instagram. We release blogs on WordPress. We share some of our images on Wikimedia Commons. We share our 3D models on Sketchfab. We've done AMAs on Reddit, and we've done collaborative projects with Adobe Stock and ArtStation. We speak with governments, funders, artists, but ultimately the scientists. We want to be working on digitizing areas that are useful for scientists to use right now to tackle the problems that we have today. An example of this is our bat digitization project. So bats belong to the order Chiroptera, and they consist of 20% of the mammal species on this planet. They're important pollinators, and their guano is an important fertilizer. But bats also act as natural reservoirs of disease. While the cause of COVID-19 in humans is still unknown, genome sequences from the beginning of the pandemic are 95% identical to a coronavirus found in a Southeast Asian bat called the intermediate horseshoe bat. We are working with 8 other EU institutions to release data from the 3 families of bats most closely related to the intermediate horseshoe bat to help researchers studying the virus. Our bat collection in the museum consists of skins in drawers, bats in the spirit collection, and skulls that are often held separately. Sometimes parts of the same specimen could be held in all 3 collections. In total, we're digitizing 8,000 bat specimens, but because they could have their skull removed, or they could have parts of their specimen in spirit, we're actually looking at 10,000 items. We're looking to release the data onto the data portal, but also onto a COVID-19 knowledge base with the other institution. These bats hold data across time and space, which can be used in research, from figuring out where and when species lived to identifying viruses in historic specimens and using these to model and predict future pandemics. It's important to note that while the bats carry the virus, they are not the enemy. Bats have always lived with these viruses, and it's humans that are creating more chances for zoonotic diseases to spill over by our actions. Intensive farming, deforestation, climate change, and hunting wild animals all increase the crossover points for humans and wild animals to come into contact, or wild animals and our domestic animals to come into contact. All of these are increasing the chances for future pandemics. Researchers at the University of Nottingham are hoping to use our bat data to locate specific specimens for virus discovery projects. Next generation sequencing can be applied to small samples of specimens to extract viral genome fragments. These can be analysed to look for novel viruses and potential ancestral viruses for things like Ebola and coronaviruses. This can provide insights into the range of viruses that have the potential to cause future outbreaks in humans, livestock, and our companion animals. I just want to finish off by talking about putting a value on our collections data. We've been working with Frontier Economics to understand what value digitizing museum collections can add to the economy. And we found out that we can expect a 10-fold return on investment in digitization. They used a range of methods, looking at the time and money saved accessing the collections online and not traveling to institutions. And more specifically, they looked at the 5 areas here. So biodiversity conservation, invasive species, medicine discovery, agricultural research and development, and mineral exploration. And while these areas might be different in all of our collections provide real value in the data that we hold in our collections. So we're going to be sharing this research on Rio Journal this week. And this has been the first time that this has been done for any museum in the world. So I just want to invite you to read this and use this if you feel like this would be useful in your area. We really want to share it with the museum community and for it to benefit everyone. So those are just a few reasons and examples about why we are Bats About Data at the Natural History Museum. And I'm happy to take questions in the panel discussion. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Jennifer. And thanks for all our speakers. I'll just dive in with my notes about the QA questions. Have everyone back. That's perfect. I think one thing I just want to start off with, that number that's been touted around the economic value of the collections data is fantastic. And I'm really interested if people have got questions, any of the audience have got questions about that, to pop in the chat channel around that, because I reckon that could spark a whole conversation kind of in itself.
Yeah, but, just to contextualize that, it's all been very conservative. While it sounds like a really big number, there's been checks on it, and we've always used the kind of minimum estimate for anything. So it's a conservative number while it sounds massive. Yeah,
so it's even more massive is the unofficial record. So I'm going to just pick up some of the questions there. So Angela Sullivan is asking that while maintaining accessibility, are there any concerns for people who are not experts using this kind of data out of context and having it tied to the Natural History Museum? That's for you, Jennifer.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm just trying to think about it. I think, so we share all of our data open access as much as we can. And really it's for people to use and reuse how they see fit. We encourage people to use our DOIs to make sure that they're citing properly so that we know how our data is being used. But really, you know, it's up to people to use it. So I'm trying to think of a situation in which someone could use it out of context. I guess it's the same thing as if you were going to come to a collection and you were going to see something and you were going to misuse it or misunderstand what it's for. It would be the same difficulties.
That's interesting there, because that's kind of breaking onto the ethics question that Julian and Shalen both kind of touched on there. And I'm just going to move on to Julian and Shalen now, because there's something interesting in your talk where, Shalen, you picked up the idea of rural areas and digital museum resources expanding their social network. And I just wonder if Julian and Shalen, you can both just expound on that a little bit in terms of what the potential benefits are for audiences like rural audiences, or perhaps, Julian, in your case, the kind of looking at those East London audiences.
I'll go first. So I think, I think it's quite not just East London, but I think rural communities. I think one of the things that data does show is there is a discrepancy. So I don't think rural communities are often as well served by museums as they could be. And it is possible that there is sort of data out there, we can get better understanding of those rural communities to improve upon that. I don't know if that sort of kind of helps, but it does seem to me that there are really good opportunities to expand museum engagement. The ethics of that, I think, are interesting, and there needs to be a conversation on that. So I don't really want to say what those issues are, because I'm kind of asking my own question around the ethics, around the role of data and ethics. I think there's a lot of questions that need to be sorted out there.
I think in the case of China, I'm not sure if the population in rural area has the same characteristic as in the UK, but I think very often they have limited access to physical museum and museum resources. Therefore, digital museum resources really play a huge role in expanding their knowledge about the world, about different cultures, and also their like daily entertainment, because people mentioned that they find it quite interesting to engaging with digital museum resources. However, there is some concern around digital divide, as in we are serving probably the richer population in rural area. So that's something I think we need to continue to work on.
Fantastic. And continuing on with that, Shalen, Livy Adus asked, what kind of museums were used in the survey for your data? Was it large national museums or specialist museums or local rural museums?
So as I explained in the survey sample, we tried to include different types of museums, including large national museum like Shanghai Museum, National Museum of China, and specialized museum like Yunnan Ethnic Ethnography Museum, and also more local and small scale. So the idea at this stage is that we try to create some generic indicators for different types of museums to adapt and kind of change to their own purposes and goals.
Fantastic. And on that one, kind of on the idea of the different audiences, Jennifer, if I can go back to you, and on a very sort of nuts and bolts kind of question, Jake Harding is asking, what software and type of infrastructure do you use to digitize and store your database?
So we use a mix of things. It depends what we're digitizing. If we're just capturing data, it goes through our internal CMS and then it goes onto our data portal. Our data portal, we built it ourselves, but it uses CCAN, which is an open source data management system. And the source code is available on GitHub. So it's all kind of very open, and we're happy for people to see that. In terms of like digitizing other things, if we're imaging something, we use something called barcode defiler, which can automate the reading of barcodes to make that easier, so that we can be taking pictures of the same species or the same area all day, and these can be tagged automatically when they go onto the computer. So yeah, I can go into more detail with that separately. If you want to email me, Jake, I'm happy to talk more about that.
I think generally as well, if people have been, you had a couple of links, some of you in the presentations as well, popping those in the chat and let people kind of go on with it. It's fantastic. So Julian, I've just got a question for you, and that is about you presented that mental health map of London, and you said about when V&A East opens. Do you know of any kind of plans to sort of show how that is impacting the local area?
I mean, I know that the idea behind V&A East, or at least when I was at the V&A, was very much that it would be situated around what was going on and serve those local communities. And part of the research I did there was to look at the role that data could have in that. So particularly in that community, that museum has the potential to do an awful lot of good. What their current plans are, or how those have evolved, it was just before COVID when I was there, so I can't really say how things have developed. But my hope is that it will be very much situated in that neighbourhood.
Fantastic. And that's, yeah, it'd be interesting. I think there's kind of going on there, Shalen, over to you. There's a question around the collecting that data, and David's asking, he says, love that emojis and memes are seen as a good indicator of a response to museum experiences. Have you seen any examples of museums making the most of this?
So to the best of my knowledge, currently, not any museum has already started using this kind of data, although they have been very active on social media. However, the use of emojis and memes, there are a few examples in commercial sector, especially in food and drink sectors. I think it's definitely worth looking into, and hopefully that one day it will benefit museum impact study as well.
Fantastic. I think that's interesting about the language that's developing around it, and also you did mention as well the idea of a centralized rating system so that people could kind of compare these to each other, which I'm sure is an entire topic in itself of kind of getting to that point of agreeing a language between that. So I've got a question for you, Jennifer, from Javier Pereira, and that's, I wonder what level of granularity are you able to extract and how? I wonder that once the data is fully available to be reusable, anyone that might fall outside of the network might be producing engagement tools without us noticing.
Yes, we want that. So we release information online and we want people to use it for whatever purpose they can. People have got in touch with us and they've told us that they've built kind of software that builds fake new species of butterflies based on our photographs, and we love it. We want people to reuse it. In terms of what data, like the granularity of data, what we're doing is we're starting off with that basic digital discoverable kind of base, and then everything is kind of attached onto that. So you've got the data as a first point, then you might have a picture, then you might have some CT scanning, then you might have the genomic data. You know, more technology is opening up all the time, and we hope that in the future even more kind of analysis will be done on the same items, but it'll all be linked back to the same location online. We hope that when people are talking about these specimens and reusing them, whether that's in science, whether that's in art, whether that's in anything, we can link it all in so that if someone is accessing something, they can find out what's gone before them and they can build on what's happened before.
That's great. It's that kind of long tail of technology where it kind of leads back into itself. That's fantastic. I'm going to jump back onto the ethics question and ask another question for you, Julian. And you left off the end of your talk talking about ethics as well. So how do you envisage your approach to ethics for a digital age? Very shortly.
Okay, very, very quick. I think that what's happening at the moment is that within the museum sector is the uncomfortableness with using things like large data sets, particularly when you go to a postcode level, is that it doesn't fit well with an ethics that is established over many decades of really good public engagement work. And so it seems to me there's a key kind of way of saying, well, rather than applying old notions of ethics, why don't we start to rethink what is ethical in terms of a digital society and all that rich data, which we can't escape. It's so much part of our lives now. But it almost feels to me that the debate around ethics needs to catch up a little bit, be reframed and rethought for this moment in time. Sorry, is that quick enough? Is that okay?
That's perfect. That's again kind of leading on to another one itself. Shalen, I wonder if you've got any thoughts on that from the work you've been doing.
I think what I want to maybe highlight in this respect is that we sometimes overlook the collaboration between different countries and how data laws and regulations in different countries will influence the project to collect data and assess its success. For example, I think the data privacy, all the ethical considerations we might discuss here in the UK might be quite different in China. I think there will also be conversation around how we kind of collaborate and create something common for especially international projects.
Cool. And I suppose, Jennifer, some of that kind of affects you as well in terms of that international spread of the data and where it's kind of being used on.
Yeah, I think for us, not so much, just because we're looking at the collections data. So I guess we would be looking at the ethics of like protecting the collection for the future. So, you know, not damaging the collection. But you know, obviously I have colleagues that are looking into kind of similar areas as Julian. It's just not an area that I personally work in.
Absolutely right. It's 5 o'clock. I'd better close the session there. And so I'd just like to say thank you very much, Jennifer, Julian, Shalen. Very interesting talks. I hope everyone found it really useful. And thank you for everyone who put your questions in the channel. I'm sorry if I missed anything. I was just trying to like rapidly read what people are doing and kind of pop it in there. But I do have a really important announcement for everyone. And that is that the virtual pub is going to be open in a moment. So you can all virtually enjoy drinking or gather a beer from somewhere, and do head over and join us in it. It'll be on the side over there where you can go as one of the sessions to kind of come in. And I'd just like to say, there we go. There it is. Bring your own booze. So bring your own everything, not just booze. So I'd just like to say thanks very much for everyone. Thank you for the talks, and we'll see you in the other pub room. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.